Hi everyone, welcome to the podcast this week. It's Anya and I'm super excited to be speaking to Prentis Hemphill. Prentis is a writer, an embodiment facilitator, a political organiser and therapist. They are the founder and director of the Embodiment Institute and the Black Embodiment Initiative, and they're the host of the podcast Becoming the People. For the last 10 years, Prentis has practiced and taught somatics in social movement organisations and has offered embodied practice during moments of social unrest and organisational upheaval. They have taught embodied leadership with Black Organising for Leadership and Dignity and generative somatics, and served as the Healing Justice Director of Black Lives Matter Global Network from 2016 to 2018. Our conversation today is focused on their debut book, What It Takes to Heal, which has come out in the UK just a few days ago. Through our conversation, we explore the ideas of this book, such as some of the limitations of individual therapy, particularly when it relates to issues that affect more than just the individual. We talk about what somatics and embodied practice is like, and we consider Prentis's hopes for the future. I really hope that you enjoy. You have found the Thinking Mind podcast. Here you can access conversations on topics like psychology, philosophy, psychiatry, and neuroscience, which are accessible to all. If you enjoy the podcast, we'd be really grateful if you could share it with someone who you think would also enjoy hearing it, or give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, as it really does help people to find us. We love to hear from you, so do reach out via email or Instagram or elsewhere on social media. And finally, if you want to support the show financially, you can buy us a coffee from the link in the show notes. Over to the conversation. Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast this week. I'm delighted to be joined by Prentis Hemphill. Prentis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Prentis, so I'm super excited to talk about your book, which came out just around 2 months ago. And I loved reading it because, and I think I've heard other people describe it as this, but it was sort of like reading poetry, like a love letter, like it's written so beautifully. And I guess that stands almost in stark contrast to the years of upheaval that it arose from and the trauma that you talk about within it, both your own, but also the trauma of so many people in society. And you start the UK edition with your experience of visiting Grenfell, which was a building block, which was the site of a huge fire where far too many people lost their lives, many of them migrants, and basically arose out of a neglect for the inhabitants from the authorities. And in the UK, I remember the day, I remember where I was when we sort of saw the images on the news. And I think that's probably the case for many people who were in the UK at the time. And so I guess I want to ask, why for you did the journey of this book begin from these collective upheavals, or at least the way that you wrote it?
Well, thank you so much. And I actually think it's coming out in the UK just now. I'm not sure when this will air, but it's just now coming out, the UK edition. And I'm really excited about that and hopefully making my way over there to be with people and community. And you talk about, the way the book is written, and I intended to write in that poetic voice in a way to illustrate the beauty of some of these moments that people didn't understand to be beautiful. We talk about uprisings and upheaval, and even, in the UK edition, when I talk about Grenfell, there's the horror of it. There's the violence and neglect of it. And then there's also what humans do on the other side of that, and the beauty of what can be built. And, sort of embedded in the book is that my hope is that we can build these things, these practices, these ways of being together before the brutality, before the violence. I hope that we can find a way to build the beautiful things that I've seen us do, even in moments that people wouldn't necessarily imagine were so beautiful.
I think that will probably almost sound surprising to a lot of people living now, particularly in view of what we tend to hear on news, if we consume them, or on social media. How did you come to think about it from that perspective, from the perspective of seeing the beauty that can arise? And what do you think can help other people move towards that?
How did I come to understand it? I think it's always been a kind of nagging feeling inside of me, something that carried with me through all of it. I think that we talk about my work, my organization, that the relationship is the reality, and we get turned away from it and turned away from connection. We get incentivized away from each other. We get scared of each other, and sometimes for very good reason. I think the actual reality is that we are connected and we long for connection, but we can be traumatized and confused and pulled away from that reality in so many different ways. So, I'm like everyone else in this moment. I'm also watching the news. I'm consuming the news of the day, and it means something to me, and it affects me deeply. And I think I'm holding on to this understanding that I have, that I think I've had for a long time, despite conditions, despite life experiences, that I think relationship is the reality. And, I long for relationship. I long for connection. To me, that is what healing is ultimately about. It's actually reconnection, reestablishing connection with ourselves and each other and our world.
And this idea of reestablishing the connection, perhaps first with ourselves, or at least not last with ourselves, as we reestablish a connection with others, it is again something that comes through your book really clearly. And again, I think I could feel my brain readjusting around this idea that there is a balance to be struck between it not being selfish to focus on one's own issues. It not being selfish to focus on one's own issues, but it being important to not do that in isolation. And I guess one place where you talked about this at the beginning was the idea of individual therapy and some of the helpful parts of it, but also the limitations. I guess some phrases that stuck with me was, how do you heal when you're still being hurt? The emotions are never individual. I wonder if you could speak about the thoughts that you shared in that part.
Yeah. That was one of the really challenging things about creating this book and communicating to people in the beginning what the book was about, because there were so many people had ideas and publishers had ideas like, okay, you focus on the social aspect and social justice aspect only, or you focus only on the individual healing piece. And there weren't a lot of people that could see how it was necessary that they be woven together, and it was almost difficult to choose the order of the chapters in that way, because I didn't want to privilege one thing over the other. I want to say that these are deeply dependent, in a way, processes. And we get in this tug of war in these conversations, at least in spaces where I am, where people are like, this is more important, this is more important. And, the point of the book is that how we are, what we do, and how we behave ripples out. We are, if we are in a way mindless about it or unaware, we're recreating everything that we've been trained into or taught or scared into. We end up recreating it through our habits, through our behaviors, through how we build relationship. So that matters, and it's important for us to look there. It's important for us to build a relationship with our interior selves in a way, so that we are developing, growing. We're not stunted or, refusing to mature in that way. And at the same time, as we're shaped by the world, we can shape it back. And so the norms of the world, the historical forces, the conditions, all of those things that we live in, they shape us. And we, I think, necessarily need to shape them back, especially as we witness and understand how the structure of the world around us ends up privileging some and crushing others. And as we learn that, it's then, I think, our responsibility to change what we see, to build new things, to get rid of the things that don't work. And that not only is a part of changing the world and changing systems and changing conditions, but we are changed in that process too. So there's always this interdependent dance that we're doing between our own quote unquote healing, transformation, development, and the building and transformation of the world around us.
What was your experience of that process through your work with the Black Lives Matter?
That was a deeply transformative experience on many, many levels. I learned a lot, and I think I'm still learning from that experience, if I'm perfectly honest with you. I do talk about it some in the book, but I think there's still so much that I'm processing and coming to understand, if I'm perfectly honest. But I came to my work with BLM, with Black Lives Matter. I was a therapist at the time and was kind of called into doing work in the network. People would bring me in to do conflict or bring me in when someone had been killed. And so I was learning how to do, what I've been taught in therapy and been taught in the somatics world, but do it in very different contexts, in people's homes, in the streets, in meeting spaces, on the go. When we were at an encampment, it was a very, very different context. So it took the kind of therapeutic ideas that I had and put them in life. We weren't in that protected, kind of safe place of a therapy room. We were in the world. We were in life. And, I learned a lot about my practice there. I learned a lot about what it really meant. I learned a lot about what it meant to be a centered presence, especially in times of upheaval. And if I'm honest, I learned something, I think in a way, I knew through my own life, but we can be in our own lives and our own stories, our own families, and not really understand how much other people are having similar experiences. And in a way, in that time, I could kind of see the expanse of historical pain that my people had lived through, were carrying. I knew it in my body. I knew it in the faces of my family and the experiences of my family. But it like stretched out as an expanse during that time. I could see it across time. And it was incredible to feel that. And it's an incredible activator. I mean, sometimes it led me to despair, and other times it led me to incredible creativity. But it was both all the time, actually.
How did you hold those two things, or those various things?
Sometimes not very well. Sometimes not very well. And even this question, which I appreciate, of like, how do we hold those things? I didn't hold them. I fell apart many times. I needed people to hold me. I didn't hold it well, and I think I realized in the falling apart that it's not. Individual people aren't able to hold collective traumas on that level. We actually have to hold it together. And to try to do that, I think, can destroy the individual. But to feel it together, I think, actually builds the community. And that's more of what we need.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So this idea of what can happen in a group that is far beyond necessarily the sum of its parts, but also the idea that going into the group, no one quite has any idea how it will work, which again is an idea that I loved in your book, that you don't have to know where you're going or where to begin or how to do it necessarily in order to join this kind of collective, this kind of movement.
That's right. Yeah, in a way, I'm trying to set the bar both low and high. I talk about transformational characters in the book, and what I mean by that is I'm writing to everyone who is willing to try, and identifying those as the people who I want to be and practice with, in movement with, in life with, is those that are willing to try and transform, not necessarily those who have perfected anything in particular. Those who are disinterested. I'm talking about those who want to try. And so I think it's a very low bar, but in a way it's also a very high bar, because a lot of us are defended against our own growth and transformation. So that's who I'm talking to in the book.
Because there's this potential for failure, right, that you have to be prepared to face up to in order to try.
That's right. There's all, shame, there's failure. Yeah, as we're kind of hopefully coming out of the way isolation and individualism has really arrested our development in a lot of ways. There are all these things we have to contend with: shame, and what it means to fail, to try and fail. We have to contend with those individually. How do I navigate feelings of failure? How do I heal and transform the shame I feel? We also have to navigate those as collectives. How do we as a collective deal with people who mess up? How do we want to be treated when we mess up? How do we practice accountability? How do we make room for repair? And these are questions for cultures, for collectives, for communities to really ponder, so that we don't set an unnecessarily high bar of entry, but the bar of entry is practice and commitment and accountability.
The idea of how we deal with failure as a society is important and timely. I mean, it feels like there isn't much space for not getting things right at the moment, even if unintended. Well, it almost feels like it's not allowed to be unintended. I don't know if that was, again, something that you dealt with in terms of differences of opinion of even how to approach situations within Black Lives Matter. I don't know if that was an area of conflict that you had to deal with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for sure. And I think that's probably true of every time that human beings come together. We have to figure that out. I think what intensifies those challenges is, the stakes, what we're up against, what we're fighting for. I think the stakes intensify. And I think, in the kind of public sphere in this moment in societies, and I can speak probably most in the most grounded way from where I'm from. I live in the southern United States, so I live in a particular context, but I know that the crises that we're facing, both in this country and I think globally, it's intensifying the stakes and it's intensifying the discourse. And all of that is, in my opinion, we are faced with questions and political challenges that seem, and likely in some cases are, I know in many cases are, life or death. And that is absolutely going to activate people into that reactive state. And so, I just keep thinking about this moment we're in, and like, okay, there's all these crises, there's compounding crises that we're facing that is increasing our kind of reactivity and our fear. The way that we're having conversations about these, the way that we're making decisions, the solutions even that are being generated are activating our fear and these, stress responses, or, how are we going to survive this moment? And it's this intensifying, it's like a powder keg in a way. It just keeps intensifying itself by, how desperate we all become to remain safe, and how it feels more and more narrow, the paths that we need to choose to actually be safe and well and have a future on this planet. So, I'm just really sitting with, I don't have the most that I know about this, what has served me in this moment and served me in moments inside of organizations, inside of BLM and every other thing that I've worked on, is when I can be centered and grounded, I can perceive options. I can perceive more opportunities. I can perceive the way through more than I can when I'm in my reactive state. But I know there's a lot of good reason why people are reactive in this moment, and I'm concerned and watchful about how that reactivity will continue to dictate our reality and our choices and our decisions.
I think this takes me to wonder about embodiment and somatics. So when you say being centered and grounded, I wonder if you could explain a little more about what that's like, what that means, and I guess how you find that yourself, and maybe how you help people to find that.
Yeah, I love that question. Thanks for that. What I'm talking about with center, I try to make it as like concrete in a way as I can, even though it's a very living, flexible space. But I want to really ground it for people so that it doesn't seem like this unachievable thing. But my somatics teacher, one of my somatics teachers, Richard Strozzi Heckler, he's one of the most advanced Aikido masters in the United States, and he has been teaching somatics for, I don't know, I'm going to say 40 plus years at this point. But he always talks about how, and maybe I should define somatics and I'll come back to that. But he talks about how a relaxed body is the most powerful body that we have. And you can think about it, as a martial artist, what he's saying in part is that when I'm relaxed, I can move into almost any move. And the most effective way to do any move is with the least amount of effort that it takes to do that move. I can focus all my energy and my exertion into that move, and then I can let it go and be prepared for the next move that comes. So a relaxed body is the most powerful body because that body has options. Whereas a body that's holding tension, that's responding to a memory, a body that's kind of living in the past in that way, can only kind of do what it's trying to do. If I'm clenching my fist in a particular way, the first thing I'm going to have to do is something with my fist, and then maybe I can figure out another move. But I'm kind of limited by what is already in my body trying to express itself. So a relaxed body is much more powerful. So when I talk about center, there's one way I'm talking about relaxation, not kind of on the beach relaxation. I'm talking about that too. That's great. But I'm talking about meeting life with a softness and without so much expectation in our muscles of what will happen next or what is happening or how I should be, but meeting it flexibly, soft. Center allows me to do that. When we talk about the center in the body, we're talking about almost the center of gravity. It doesn't exactly map onto the center of gravity, but that place in our body that kind of is where the bottom half of our bodies meet the top half of our bodies, where a lot of things get translated through our core. That's why our core is so important. It translates movement in a particular way. But we're talking about breathing into that place, settling into that place, relaxing into that place, which kind of requires us to let go of tension in other parts of our body so that we can breathe into and settle into that place. Now, the thing about somatics and embodiment is that we hold a lot of things in our bodies. We hold our breath. We hold our postures in particular ways. We hold tension. We hold, sometimes we can even have a kind of resignation almost in our muscles, a way that our muscles have almost kind of given up. It's hard to actually engage them in a particular way. And learn that and we hold that through experiences that we have. Our bodies kind of learn, this is the way I need to be. So if you live in a household or grow up in a household where you're kind of taught not to show emotion, the muscles in your face are going to learn how to suppress emotion, and you're going to have a contraction when emotiveness tries to come. There's going to be something in you that pushes it down unconsciously because you learn to do that. If you grew up in a home where you could express anger but not tenderness, there are going to be parts of you that are more likely to go there, that are just more well-used neural pathways and also muscular pathways that are just ready to activate. And so somatics and embodiment is kind of that understanding that the way you learn a sport, for example, you learn to hit a baseball or you learn to kick a ball, and you learn all the kind of muscular patterns to do that well and to do that better. We also learn that about behavior and how we are with each other and how we build relationship. And we learn those, we refine those same kind of skills. And embodiment is like, let's take a look at what we've learned and see if it's actually what we want to be. And if it's not what we want to be, how do we release some of the holding, and how do we practice new things that actually bring us into closer alignment with how we want to show up in the world? I would say that's at the very core what I'm talking about when I talk about somatics and embodiment.
And is it do you, I guess I'm quite curious about how it's done, because it's not, I haven't observed that kind of therapeutic encounter. I mean, would you be in a room together like you might be in talking therapy, or is it more group based?
All of the above, in a way. Yeah, you can do it in a lot of different ways. There are somatic therapists that would work in a kind of one-on-one setting, and many of them do not use touch, so they would really just be, it's kind of a line of inquiry in a way. What's going on in your body, turning that up, turning that down, getting curious about that, doing certain movements. You can do it in that kind of traditional talk therapy setting, but just adding in a kind of deepening and listening to the body. You can also do it in group settings, and I teach this a lot, where I work with people in groups to try on movements that end up evoking certain kinds of responses so that we can see ourselves. There's a difference between who I think I am and how I actually show up. And so we do practices in groups that help people see and understand how they actually show up in certain kinds of encounters. And then I also do body work with people where, and not all somatic therapists do this, so you'd have to see if you're working with someone who does, where I actually work with the fascia in the body to let things out, let things move, sort of manipulating and resonating with the fascia and allowing people to discharge whatever it is that they need to move out and through. So those are some of the ways that you can do it.
How do you tune into that? How do you tune into where you may need to manipulate something?
When I'm working with someone?
Yes, yeah.
Well, asking is one. Okay. That's one way. Being curious, because people, some people know a lot about their bodies, and some people, their bodies are very mysterious to them, and it's hard to locate anything or keep their attention there. So I usually start out with some level of curiosity. What do you know about your body? Where do you feel this thing that you're bringing? And supporting them to get curious about that. As a practitioner, I would say, as a body worker, the more you work with people, the more you can tell how breath moves through their body. That's one way to look. Where does breath get caught? Where are places that it seems like they've almost vacated? There's very little movement, or the very little breath there. You can sort of tell how people are mapping energy through their body. Now, there can be lots of reasons, injuries or pain. There can also be kind of the residue of a traumatic moment, something they're still embracing from, that has them hold their bodies in particular ways. So I just kind of look for, you can look in someone's face, if someone has eyebrows that are kind of remain kind of high, maybe that's just their face, but it might be curious, like, what does it take to actually hold that way of being? And I get curious there and see if there are ways to support more flow, more breath, more inhabiting parts of ourselves that we may have vacated.
I'm curious about how this is not talked about more, well, at least in the UK. But, so like, even like our diagnostic criteria for anxiety include muscular tension, or for depression, similarly, there's so much that's about the body, but no treatment really addresses that in the way that you've just spoken about.
Yeah, I mean, it's here in the US, more and more people are talking about it. When I started, probably 2009, 2008 or 9, it was a very odd thing. It was a very odd thing to talk about. So the fact that we're even talking about it and people invite me to talk about it on podcasts, it feels like I'm living in a different world than I once was. I was very strange to people in the beginning when I was talking about it. And I would say, people have been studying this for decades and decades. So, it kind of went underground for a while and was having a moment of resurgence. And I have a lot of friends in the UK that are like, we don't talk about this at all. My honest assessment of why this is strange or not talked about is that I'm going to offer a little bit of a political historical frame to it. I think there is a reason why we devalue the information of the body and the sensations of the body. I think there's a cultural, and again, I can speak for the US and maybe a little bit expand to the West. I don't think it's only a challenge in the West, but the way that we think about the body, the way that we think about kind of the unruly aspects of who we are, the body, the feminine, the child, nature, emotions, all of these aspects of being alive to me are ultimately dealt with in very similar ways. We try to suppress them. We try to put them down. And that's not accidental. I mean, I think it's part of, what the Enlightenment brought, and the, Descartes and Bacon and all of these folks. I think, therefore I am. We have to conquer nature and the feminine, and the wild savages with their dancing and their rhythm and their bodies. The West has not recovered from that. They haven't recovered from that way of understanding who they are. But I always say, people here, maybe people there too, talk about the mind-body split. And I really don't think, I understand why we name it that way, but the mind-body split is not a thing. It's a way that we are trained into being in our bodies. It's a way that we are trained into deprioritizing felt sensation, emotions, all of that stuffness of life, the kind of qualia in a way of life. We are taught to suppress that. So it's a taught thing. It's a learned thing. The mind-body split is something that we train our kids into. I have a 2.5-year-old, and I think about, she's almost 3 now. I need to stop saying that. But I tell people, as soon as she came to the world, she was communicating with me, and I had a friend visit. I think she was probably a year or something. And my friend was like, y'all are having full on conversations with her. And I was like, well, it didn't occur to me, one, because I haven't been around kids in a long time, but she was just so clearly communicating to me. And I thought, if I weren't, and if my partner wasn't, if we weren't parents that listened to the communication of the child, they would quickly learn to stop listening to themselves and to not, they would learn that how they felt and what they were expressing was secondary to what they were being told about how they should be or what they should feel. And I know that must have happened to me and lots of other people I knew. You learn not to value your own experience of life. So I think it's a deeply learned thing that we're kind of coming out of, trying to shake off. We know there's more to being alive, and we know we spend a lot of time and energy suppressing what we feel, and we're trying to get back in touch with it. We go to therapy, we try to get in touch with it, and at the same time, we spend a lot of our days unconsciously suppressing what's here.
Yeah, I mean, even the basics of sort of not going to the toilet because you're on a really long on-call shift, and God forbid that your bladder gets in the way of doing a bit more work. But I guess that's perhaps one of the things that you also speak to when you say it's political, in that it doesn't suit capitalism to be heavily in touch with where things are at inside on any particular day.
That's right. If I could feel my body, if I weren't sort of forced out of my body, if we weren't forced out of our bodies, less of the extractive policies, extractive labor practices would be possible. It kind of requires us, the never satisfied profit line requires us to step outside of our bodies, because if we felt it all, we'd have to make different decisions.
Yeah, it's I mean, so the kind of memory or the thought that just sprung to mind was a scientist that I spoke to not long ago did a study where they used a drug that affects gut motility, so sort of the speed with which just our bowels move, and they found that they could affect people's responses to disgusting images, videos, just by manipulating that. And I guess it's sort of neuroscientific evidence for something that a lot of people felt and is in our language, and the gut feelings, etc. But going back to what you were saying about turning that feeling off and how that allows exploitation, I guess that's just where it took me, and it took me to think about the atrocities that were possible, the racial injustices as well that you weave through your book, and the role that just splitting off our thoughts from our internal feelings played in that and continues to.
Yeah, it's necessary. I mean, I think that's really when a light turned on for me, when I understood that oppression is, the way I'd kind of been even trained politically was to understand, the way the structures work, the way the system works. And I really started to understand it as an issue of bodies, what bodies experience what more. And that really changed. It dropped it in a way into my own belly in a really uncomfortable way. I was like, oh, these systems that we're talking about are not just like kind of sinister ideas, but people live through these things, and it changes the course of people's lives and the way they feel about themselves and the way they have relationships with their children. That oppression is it changes the future, because it changes how people feel right now in their lives. And that was something about that was just so visceral. It's been so visceral for me to understand it that way.
I'm wondering about, again, the thought that sprung to my mind in that the idea of over history, all of those bodily boundaries that have been broken, that have been, I guess, betrayed, and similarly with individual trauma, how often that arises out of a violation of someone's boundary, and I guess how you align with that in somatics and embodiment practice, how you manage that. I guess I can imagine it being very difficult to put someone in touch with their body if they and for them to be with somebody who is also trying to tune into their body in such a way. Like, I can imagine that feeling hard and bringing up memories that are really difficult. And I guess I wonder how you think about it, how you navigate it.
Yeah, carefully, honestly, carefully, because, working with people, I try not to indicate, I've been doing this, like I said, for a long time, and I still every day discover something in my own experience. I've surrendered to this being a never-ending journey, embodiment, and it's endlessly fascinating. It's been. I don't know. I'm just really thankful that I orient my life this way, into my living this way, my aliveness, and at the same time, there's not a destination. So if someone's coming to work with me, I'm not trying to get them to feel anything in particular. It's always managing this. People can venture into places inside of themselves if they're not alone a lot easier than if they feel alone. And so when I'm working with someone, sometimes just building, it's kind of like therapeutic lines. First, you want to build trust, and I can build that kind of trust and proximity, being close. Of when I work with someone, I always have them just sort of feel me. And I've worked with people who are very terrified, whose bodies had been violated, and rather than me saying, okay, here, lay on the table and I'm going to work on you and you're going to have to deal with it, I've had people spend the session just making contact with me and seeing if they trust me. So I'm working from connection, proximity, trust. The real creative work around this way of going about healing and transformation is that I'm really attending to what does safety and connection feel like for you. And we can do whatever we want in the room. If you want to build a fort, if you want to sit across the room for a session and just check me out and see how you feel about me, we can do that. I don't feel limited by this is what it has to look like and you're just going to have to tolerate doing that. Embodiment work is deeply, deeply creative work in that way. And so I get to really have people say, okay, from here, what does your body feel like? Can something let go, or does something want to open up? If not, move 2 feet back and try it from there. So yeah, I don't try to, in a way, privilege any particular experience, or you have to be able to do this. It is a deeply creative process with people of figuring out what amount of connection and safety allows them to feel again.
And in your book, you talk about that creativity coming from a place where one is able to let go, at least of some fear, or at least isn't moving from a place of fear. And it feels like a cycle, like almost if you can let go of some of the bodily, because fear again is so physical, you feel your shoulders tense, you feel your heartbeat start to rise, that almost if you can relax that, that's where the creativity can come, and then it feels like a very loving process.
Yeah, I really believe that that's kind of what we are, these creative beings. We talk about resilience and how important it is, and those capacities to be generative, adaptive, relational, responsive, creative. They're so important. And one of my friends and teachers, Alta Star, will always say, resilience is our birthright. It's kind of how we come into this place as creative, co-creating with the unknown all the time. And we get scared out of that. We get pushed away from that. But that is who we are when we relax and when we can let go and when we're safe enough to do that. That's who we really, really, really are. We're deeply creative beings, I believe. So that's what this work is, helping people recover and remember that underneath it all, they're here to create.
And bringing that back to think about the collective, so sort of moving from that individual work into the group, or I guess moving from perhaps groups to bigger groups. You speak about the importance of courage, and that not necessarily being the absence of fear. I wonder if you could talk to perhaps even in how you're thinking about where the world is now, and thinking about the future. What thoughts you have that maybe didn't make it into your book, about where courage might take us with the things that have arisen.
So much has arisen since my book. I mean, yeah, you write a book and then you wait a year for the book to come out, and then everything changes. Like the whole world changes. I have been thinking a lot about fear lately, and how our unwillingness to feel and name our fear makes us more susceptible to the demagogue or the authoritarian, who speaks to our fears but tells us that we don't have to feel them, that we can conquer them, that we can be the strong man, or that they will be the strong man and protect us. I just see the way our fear is being manipulated, being activated and then manipulated so that we act in particular ways that serve particular people. It's really, when I look around, I'm like, gosh, there's just so much fear. And I understand it. I'm afraid at times. But if we don't understand that we're afraid, if we don't feel afraid, if we're not honest about our fear, it really leaves us so vulnerable to someone else to use that. So I'm partly what I'm talking about with courage is, how are we going to relate to our fear? How are we going to relate to our fear in this time? Are we going to deny it? Are we going to try to hide it? Or are we going to be honest about it and organize around it? Are we going to hold each other when we are afraid? And I was telling someone just a couple of days ago that people always like, how do I be like you and not be afraid? I'm like, I'm afraid every day. I'm afraid all the time. But I'm also learning how to, when I feel that fear, tremble in the arms of my partner or a friend, because so much of the tension in my body is me being unwilling to tremble. So much of the tightness is me being unwilling to shake. And when I shake and when I tremble and when the fear moves through, I can understand both that I'm vulnerable, which is the reality. We're all vulnerable. Life is a very vulnerable experience. And I mean that in all the ways. Like, we could lose our lives at any time, and we're vulnerable. We deny that, but we are. Such a vulnerable experience. But as soon as I understand how vulnerable I am, I can also understand how strong I am. I can understand how powerful I am. I can understand how powerful we are together. Like, that we are, there's a limit to our power and there's a reality to our power. I can feel that when I'm not posturing so much, when I'm not afraid of my own fear and feeling. So I think my invitation in this moment to all of us is to make it okay to feel the fear, because we're up against a lot. I actually don't even care where you position yourself politically. Everybody is afraid. And everybody's afraid. So if we could feel that fear and understand both the that fear is telling us that we care about our lives, we care about each other. There's a fragility and a sacredness to our lives. And there is a power and a strength when we come together. The courage is to feel the fear. The courage is to come together. The courage is to be as human as we can possibly be in this time. And that's really the call of this moment, I think, that we're all having to face.
Gosh, yeah. The courage to sort of reach a hand across that far left, far right, centrist, whatever, just that, as you're saying, what we all care about is being here and being alive and living a good life. And actually, that's very similar for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Prentis, I'm devastated to bring this to a close. I hope you will write another book so I can borrow more of your time.
Oh, thank you. That's such a kind thing to say.
Thank you so much for speaking to me today.
Well, thank you so much. What a lovely conversation. I appreciate it.
If people want to find you, read more about you, read more than the book, where would you point people to?
I'd point you to my website, PrentisHempill.com. I would point you to my podcast, Becoming the People. And please do get the book, What It Takes to Heal. It should be out in the UK. And hopefully I'll make my way across that really big pond to come hang out with you all soon.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Reach out if you do. That would be great.
Thank you. Take good care.
Thank you so much.